and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. Hope your January's been alright. It's the end of January now, isn't it? Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of January. I read 9 books in the month of January, which I was quite surprised at the number 9, being that I've decided not to set myself a Goodreads target this year. I set it at 1 actually, and I thought, well, I'll just see how I get on, and 9 is like a pretty good number just for like chilling out and reading. What is this little bit of fluff that's trying to get in my mouth? So yeah, so let's talk about the books that I've read. So we'll start with the 2 books. Here's a question for you. When you watch wrap-ups, is there a preferred way that you like watching wrap-ups? Just because for me, there's not. I know some people start with the lower rated books and work their way up to the highest rated. Some people start and sort of go through what they read at the beginning of the month and work to the end. I feel like I do a sort of maybe a little bit like that, but also I always start with the books that I don't have. Do people have preferred ways of watching wrap-ups? Just interested. But as I said, I'll start with the 2 books that I haven't got here, and both of them are audiobooks. One's a 5-star, one's a 1-star, different ends of the spectrum. The first one is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, and I actually think I've got the book for this somewhere. No, I haven't. This is a book that I have read, I think this is my 4th or 5th time reading it, because I'd listened to the audiobook twice, I'd read it twice, so this was my 3rd time listening to the audiobook and my 5th time reading it overall. Really, really love this book. It's a really great sort of original idea behind a book that I'd not really experienced before when I read it. I read it for my online book club for the first time, like about 5 or 6 years ago. Is it that long ago? My lord. And yeah, have I got lipstick on my lip chin? No, lip chin. So what it is you follow Ursula. Every time I describe it, I feel like I don't do it justice, so please just read it. You follow Ursula and her life and you follow her from a child all the way up until she's older, and throughout her life you come across different situations in which she dies in those situations. So for instance, when she's first born, there's a middle of a snowstorm and the doctor doesn't make it out to her mother in time and she dies. She doesn't live. And another time her brother throws a doll out of a window and she goes after the doll out the window and she dies. But in another time he doesn't throw the doll out the window and she doesn't go after the doll, so she lives. So yeah, it's really good, and then it brings you up to a point in history which I sort of wasn't really expecting it to get to, with quite a sort of monumental event that takes place. But I love it. I really, really, really think it's amazing. And as I said, I've read this 5 times, and there's actually, it's over there, I can't reach it, but there's a sequel to this book called A God in Ruins, which follows Ursula's brother Teddy. And my plan was to listen to this and then finally get round to reading, because I've had the paperback of this book for years, like years and years, and finally get round to reading it, and I bloody didn't do it this month. So maybe I'll get round to reading that in February, because I wanted to read it quite in succession, like quickly after I'd read that one. But yeah, I think this book is amazing. It's beautifully written, characters, description, it's just wonderful. I love the fact when as Ursula gets a bit older, she sort of recognises this deja vu feeling she's having. So when she's getting close to events that are sort of momentous in her life, she almost knows what's happening, and the way she describes that happening to her, I just love it. I just think it's a fantastic book, really, really great. Love it, love it, love it. So yeah, that was 5 stars. The 1-star audiobook was Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I was reading this for my book club at work, and I decided to pick an Agatha Christie book because after I'd read And Then There Were None at the end of last year, which I loved, I was like, oh, it would be really great to read and discuss one. So I picked that one, Murder on the Orient Express, just because it's very, very famous, very accessible. Dogs barking outside, and I was really disappointed. I found it, and I feel like maybe it's just the Poirot Agatha Christie's aren't for me, because I've only read 3 Agatha Christie books, one being And Then There Were None, which I loved. Then I read Hercule Poirot's Christmas, which I didn't really enjoy. I found it was just sort of like more of a transcript of like an event happening at the beginning, and then after that is just Poirot just interviewing different people. And then that's exactly how I found Murder on the Orient Express. I didn't care for these characters. I didn't really care who'd done it. I will say, I feel like the actual, the unveiling of who did the murder at the end, I thought that was very clever, and I did not see that coming. But yeah, for me, it was just slow and long, and yeah, I just didn't get anything from it, so I gave that 1 star. And I think maybe I'll be avoiding the Poirot ones in future, just because the last 2 Poirot Agatha Christie's I've read I haven't enjoyed. So yeah, disappointing. But those are the 2 audiobooks that I've listened to. And then the books that I've read this month, I'll group these. There's a couple of like groups of books actually. So I started the year even, by reading Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding, and followed that up with Bridget Jones' The Edge of Reason, also by Helen Fielding. This is a, well, would you call this a duology? Because there's now a 3rd book, isn't there? Bridget Mad About the Boy? Is that would be included, I guess. But these are, I love these front covers. These are the anniversary editions published by Picador. They're absolutely great. I fucking love Bridget Jones, and I've read it a number of times throughout my life, and every time I revisit it I get a little bit more from it, because I'm at a different point in my life, or I'm a little bit closer to Bridget's age, or I'm like, every time I read it I just get something different from it. I find it so funny. And also what I love about both of these books, I'll include both of these. I gave this one 5 stars and this one 4 stars. What I love about it is that it really holds up. Like, for books written in the 90s about like when sort of Facebook and stuff and that weren't around, this really feels like it could be happening now. And I just really like her. I love how funny she is. I love like her mother being funny, and just like the little lines and things. It's really, I feel like it's, for me, I'm not a big fan of books which mention weight and which mention losing weight and blah 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 blah, and there's a lot of that in here. So for these 2 to hold up and get 5 and 4 stars, even regardless of that fact, I love them. They're really high, and yeah, it's just so nostalgic. And like she talks about shops that I used to shop in when I was younger, and yeah, I just really loved it. So yeah, both of those, love those, really recommend those very much. Let's do the other series of books before I move on to the last 2. So oh yeah, you might well have been following me on Instagram, where I'm putting up all of my reviews, a short review and a star rating for those for the books that I read this year. I wanted to do that because somebody else I follow does that, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And also it's a good record, I think, to keep things, and then I can sort of go back through it at any time. I used to keep a book journal, but I don't anymore, so that's sort of like my mini book journal. Anyway, I've also been reading the Frieda Klein series, so I've only got 2 of them here. I've read Tuesday, so Tuesday's gone, Wednesday's, what's Wednesday called? Waiting for Wednesday, and Thursday's Child, and I'm actually on Friday on My Mind now. So there's 8 in the series, so I'm on the 5th one in the series, so I've only got 3 books left. I really enjoy these. These were recommended by Jen Campbell. She read the whole series last year and very much enjoyed them. I can't really give much away about plot here, because there's a thread that's running through them. So you're following Frieda Klein, who is a psychoanalyst, and in early books is sort of assisting the police with different cases, and the book, the case that you address in the 1st book, which I actually read at the end of last year, Blue Monday, is a thread that runs through these books, and then each book has a different case, which I really enjoy, because you sort of feel involved, and there's fresh stuff every book you pick up. You're like, what's the case going to be? But there's also stuff that you're aware of, and you're revisiting characters that you've grown to love and things like that. And yeah, I really have been enjoying them. If you're into your crime, I feel like this is a great series to get into. I've met 2 people at work have started reading these already, and they're both really loving them. One's on Friday, one's only just finished Monday. I've had quite a few people message me in my normal life saying, oh, I picked up that Blue Monday book after I saw that you were reading it, and I'm really into it, etc. So yeah, I feel like they're really great. They're not like the best written books I've ever read, and there's not like oodles of beautiful description and character development and stuff, but for what they are, I get a lot of joy out of them. So yeah, very much enjoying that series, and would recommend, if you're into your crime, then that is a good series to go into. So the last 2 books that I've read, which aren't in a series, they're just individual books, both quite low ratings actually. The first one being The Glassblowers by Daphne du Maurier. I gave this book 1 star. Imagine a world where I've given a Daphne du Maurier book 1 star. I did not get on with this book. This was the book that we read for my Patreon book club, and we had a really great discussion about it last weekend actually, because there was like someone in there gave that 5 stars. Like people, like somebody really loved this book. Other people didn't like it as much as that, but gave it middling, and some people just didn't like it like I did. My biggest issue with this is that for me this did not feel like a book written by Daphne du Maurier. There's no sort of gothic undertones, there's no description, there's no character development. The pace of this moves incredibly swiftly. For me, it felt like I was reading like bullet points in history. It's following the a glass blowing family, so a family that are involved in glass, their sort of like family history. So it starts off, you meet Sophie, who is one of the sisters in this family, and she meets her long lost nephew, and he is under a sort of he doesn't know the truth behind his father's history, and Sophie says, oh well, I will write to you and you can pick whether or not you want to read them, and this is your father's history. So that first chapter, I felt there was promise in that, because it felt a bit like Daphne du Maurier. I was like, oh yeah, I'm less interested. But then her letters, and actually somebody in Patreon book club pointing this out, is that it feels like it's written like someone's just trying to get their family history down, which of course it is, because it's written in the form of a letter. But for me, it just didn't do anything for me. 1 star, disappointed, would not recommend. Like yeah, if it's a few people in book club, this was their first Daphne du Maurier, and I was heartbroken for them, because I was like, guys, please don't judge on this. There's so much more to come. So yeah, gave that 1 star. And then the last book that I've just finished is Animals by Emma Jane Unsworth, and I gave this 2 stars. I thought I was gonna fucking love this. Like, I've heard such good things about it. It's one of some of my favourite booktubers. It's like one of their favourite books, given it 5 stars, etc. And I bought this in Waterstones at the beginning of the year, because I was so excited to read it. But for me, I found the way it was written very interesting. It's written sort of conversationally, massive paragraphs, which isn't something I'm really into normally, but I felt like it really worked. Sort of almost like string of consciousness. Some of the paragraphs are just sort of like things that are going, like observational things that are going on. It moves very bam 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 bam. But ultimately for me, there was a lot of experience in here that I couldn't relate to, mainly to do with drugs and taking drugs and using drugs, and I mean I have very little experience with taking and using drugs, and none of my experiences sort of match up to what is here, and yeah, I thought ultimately as well it celebrated what I saw as quite a toxic friendship. I didn't feel like these 2 girls, Tyler and Laura, were particularly good for each other at all, and yeah, I just couldn't get on board with it. I just don't think it was for me. I really want to give Emma Jane Unsworth a new book, which is called Adults, I think it's called. I've put a reservation on it at the library, because like I said, I enjoyed the sort of writing style, but yeah, the actual content of the book I struggled to get on board with. So those are the books that I read in the month of January. Let me know what you read in the month of January. Let me know if you've read any of these books. If you feel like you fancy maybe that crime series, yeah, I've been very, very much enjoying it. And I'll see you all again for my favourites video before I take February off. So see you then.